Ever get that feeling like you're trying to grasp a really big idea, but you don't want to have to dig through tons of information?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think we've all been there.
Well, that's kind of the whole point of this deep dive, right? You guys sent in some super interesting stuff about this moral circle concept.
Yeah, it's really central to Jeff Sebo's book, The Moral Circle: Who Matters, What Matters, and Why.
Which is a great title, by the way.
It is.
So right off the bat, what's so cool about this whole moral circle thing is it pushes you to think beyond just who's right in front of you.
Right. It's who and what deserves your ethical consideration. Where do you draw those boundaries?
Exactly. It's bigger than just the people we see every day, right? Sebo's making us broaden our view.
For sure.
So basically, this moral circle, it's all about who and what we think deserves fair treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And in this deep dive, we're going to trace how that circle's gotten bigger over time and who we're talking about, including now, and why it even matters. And some ways you might, widen your own perspective.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is.
It is a lot to unpack.
Yeah, but that's why we're here. We've got time.
Exactly. We'll break it down.
So the big questions are, how has this whole idea of right and wrong changed to include more beings and things?
Right. And who are we considering morally obligated to now?
And why is expanding the circle so important? And then how can we actually practically broaden our own moral circles?
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive in.
All right. So let's start by looking back in time at how this idea developed.
Okay.
If we zoom out to the big picture of history, you see that early on, the boundaries of who was considered morally important were super narrow.
Okay, so in ancient times, your moral obligations basically stopped at your tribe or nation's border?
Yeah, pretty much. It was a very clear us versus them kind of thing.
Right. But then things started to shift. Think about how we view slavery now.
Huge shift.
Yeah, for centuries, it's totally normal, even woven into society.
Totally.
And now, thankfully, it's seen as completely horrific.
Yeah, almost universally condemned.
Yeah. And that change, that's a big deal. It means we finally recognize that all humans deserve basic respect and freedom.
It's a fundamental shift in thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty amazing when you think about how far that circle has expanded just for basic human rights.
Totally. And another powerful example is the fight for women's rights.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't that long ago that women in many places couldn't vote or own property or have the same opportunities in education or work.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about.
Right. And the ongoing push for gender equality shows how we're still expanding who we believe deserves equal moral standing and treatment.
Yeah, makes you wonder what things we think are totally normal now that future generations will look back on and be like, what were they thinking?
Right. What seems completely obvious to us now might be totally unthinkable to them.
Totally. And here's where it gets really fascinating to me.
But tell me.
The whole evolution of how we think about animals, even a few decades ago, the way animals were treated on factory farms or for entertainment, it didn't really seem like a big ethical issue for most people.
Yeah, things have changed a lot, haven't they?
So much. Now you see veganism is on the rise. People are much more aware of animal sentience, the fact that they can feel emotions and experience the world.
Right.
And we're having serious conversations about animal rights. That's a big expansion of our moral circle to include non-human beings.
Absolutely. And I think what often drives these expansions is new knowledge and a deeper understanding of others. Think about Jane Goodall's work with chimpanzees.
Oh my gosh, her research is incredible, so groundbreaking.
Totally transformative.
Yeah, before her work, people mostly thought animals were just ruled by instinct, they didn't have complex emotions or social lives.
Yeah.
But she spent years observing chimps in their natural habitat, and what did she find?
She found that they're incredibly intelligent.
Yeah.
They have these complex social hierarchies.
They feel joy and sadness, even grief.
Yeah, she really challenged those old assumptions about what was going on inside their minds.
Absolutely. And that deeper understanding, that recognition of their intelligence and their social connections, it really changed how a lot of people viewed primates and then by extension, other animals.
For sure, it chipped away at that idea that only humans deserved moral consideration.
Yeah. Have you thought about how your own relationship with animals has changed as you've learned more about them?
I have. And it makes me wonder about these historical expansions of the moral circle. What really stands out to you about them?
What really strikes me is that these changes, they weren't always easy or everyone just suddenly agreed.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of pushback, debate, struggle to get people to recognize the inherent worth of those who had been excluded.
For sure.
So if we've come this far expanding our circle already, it makes you think, where are the boundaries now? And are they really justified?
Right. Are we drawing the lines in the right places?
Which brings us to the next big question. Who else should we be including in our moral obligations right now?
And this is where it gets really tough.
Totally.
As you said, it's easier to empathize with those who are like us.
Yeah.
But Sebo challenges us to extend that moral consideration to those who seem different.
In any way, right.
Yeah, like in how they look or what they believe or where they come from.
It's about going beyond those surface differences.
Absolutely.
And the global refugee crisis is such a powerful and urgent example of this.
It is.
You've got millions of people displaced by just unimaginable situations.
Heartbreaking.
War, persecution, poverty, the devastating effects of climate change, and yet
It seems like there's this hesitation,
there is.
a struggle for societies to really open their borders and their hearts.
Yeah, it's like we're drawing lines based on nationality or perceived cultural differences.
Yeah, which is exactly what we're trying to move beyond.
It is, and it makes you really think about the root causes of that reluctance to help.
It does. And Sebo argues that the very same principles that made us condemn slavery and fight for women's rights, those principles of human dignity and well-being, should also apply to those suffering today.
Yeah, regardless of their nationality or background.
Exactly. And he also asks us to think about future generations.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Right. They're going to be so affected by the choices we make now, but they don't have a say in those choices.
Right, they don't have a voice yet.
Exactly. So don't we have a moral obligation to them to protect their future?
That's a really profound point.
It is. And then Sebo goes even further into this thought-provoking territory. He brings up the ethical treatment of highly intelligent AI.
Whoa.
I know it sounds like sci-fi, but his argument is super interesting. He's basically asking, what if we encounter non-biological beings that are truly intelligent and conscious and maybe even capable of suffering?
Okay.
Could we really exclude them from our moral circle just because they're not made of flesh and blood?
So what would be the criteria for deciding who's in and who's out?
Exactly. It makes you examine the very basis of your moral beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Is it about biology, sentience, the ability to reason?
Right.
Sebo compares it to how people resisted giving rights to animals and marginalized groups in the past.
Yeah.
Those groups were seen as different, less deserving of moral consideration.
Yeah.
So what are your initial thoughts on extending moral consideration to AI?
It definitely makes you rethink your assumptions. It might seem abstract now, but look how much our views on animals have changed in just a few decades.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what future generations will think of how we see AI and other potential non-biological intelligences.
It really does.
So we're talking about potentially expanding our circle to include those who are different from us now and those who will live in the future.
Exactly.
But why does this broader view even matter? Why is this expansion so important?
Because it has real-world consequences.
Like what?
Well, you mentioned climate change earlier.
Yeah.
It's not just an environmental issue. It's a huge ethical challenge.
In what way?
The things we do today, the emissions we release, the resources we consume, they're going to have devastating and long-lasting impacts on generations to come.
Right. And if we only care about those alive right now.
It's easier to ignore those long-term, potentially catastrophic impacts.
Yeah, it's that classic out of sight, out of mind problem on a massive scale.
Right.
But you mentioned a story about the ozone layer crisis earlier.
Yeah.
How does that connect to this idea of considering future generations?
That's a great example of how thinking about the well-being of future generations can lead to positive action.
Okay.
When scientists found out we were harming the ozone layer with certain chemicals, there was this global effort to ban them.
Right. There was a huge movement to stop using CFCs.
Yeah. And it wasn't just about protecting ourselves. It was about protecting the health of people who hadn't even been born yet.
Wow.
Yeah, preventing things like widespread skin cancer from increased UV radiation.
So it shows we can make positive change on a global scale when we think beyond our immediate needs and concerns.
Exactly. We can broaden our moral horizons and make a real difference.
It's inspiring. So what lessons do you think we can learn from the ozone layer crisis that could help us tackle other complex global challenges like climate change?
I think the biggest lesson is the power of collective action when it's driven by a sense of responsibility that goes beyond ourselves and our present moment.
So we're not just responsible for ourselves, we're responsible for future generations too.
Exactly.
So if we agree that this expansion of our moral circle is important, not just philosophically, but practically, how do we actually do it? How do we cultivate this broader perspective in our own lives?
Well, Sebo gives us some concrete steps.
Okay, I'm ready to hear them.
One key thing is practicing empathy.
Okay.
It's about consciously trying to understand and share the feelings of those beyond our immediate connections.
So like trying to see things from their point of view.
Exactly. Trying to consider the perspectives of people from different cultures, those facing different challenges, and even thinking about the potential experiences of animals or the well-being of future generations.
So stepping outside our own limited experience.
Yeah, and challenging our own biases.
Makes sense. What else?
He also talks about making ethical choices in our everyday lives.
Okay, so how does that look practically?
It can be anything from supporting sustainable and cruelty-free products to advocating for social justice.
Yeah, getting involved in your community.
Yeah, and even just educating yourself about issues that affect vulnerable populations.
Whether they're far away or belong to a different species.
Exactly.
So basically, our everyday actions should reflect our expanding sense of moral responsibility.
Absolutely.
What's one final key aspect of broadening our moral circle?
Being open to moral growth and evolution.
Okay.
Sebo reminds us that what's considered morally right or wrong can change over time.
Like what was acceptable in the past might be totally unacceptable now.
Right, so we need to be open to reevaluating our own beliefs and acknowledging that our understanding of right and wrong can change as we learn and grow.
So it's about being humble, recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and being willing to learn and adapt our moral compass.
Exactly.
So it seems like Sebo's main message is that a wider, more inclusive moral outlook isn't just a nice idea. It's essential for creating a more just and compassionate world for everyone, both now and in the future.
I completely agree.
By consciously expanding our moral circle, we're moving towards a more ethical and responsible way of living on this planet.
That's the goal.
So as you've been listening, we want to leave you with this question. Have you ever really thought about the boundaries of your own moral circle? Has anything we talked about today made you reconsider who or what deserves your moral consideration?
It's worth taking a moment to reflect.
It is. Maybe think about a specific area in your life. It could be how you consume products, how you interact with people from different backgrounds, or even how you think about the future of our planet, and ask yourself, where are the edges of my moral circle in this area? And what's one small, concrete step I could take to expand it even just a little bit?
It's about taking those small steps.
It is. Remember, this journey of moral expansion, it's ongoing, and it often starts with a single act of reflection.